Girl disappears in 1988 in California. 23 years later, her mother sees her on a billboard. Imagine this. It's a warm summer day in California. 1988. You're enjoying a beautiful moment with your family when, in the blink of an eye, your 4-year-old daughter disappears without a trace. Police find nothing, no clues, no witnesses, nothing at all. You search desperately, your heart breaking a little more each day. Then, 23 years later, driving down a crowded street, you glance up at a billboard and there she is. Your daughter's face, older now but unmistakably hers, looking down at you. How is this possible? Where has she been all these years, and what dark secrets await your discovery? It was Sunday, June 12, 1988, a scorching day in San Diego, California. The air was thick with humidity, and the sun blazed overhead, reflecting brightly on the polished hoods of passing convertibles and family cars. Palm trees lined every street, their long shadows stretching lazily over hot pavements. Radios in cars and on street corners blasted hits by Madonna, Michael Jackson, and Guns N' Roses. People dressed in bright colors, neon greens, pinks, blues, and yellows, embodying the vibrant energy of the late 80s. At a cozy house in a quiet suburb, Rebecca Miller stood in the kitchen preparing breakfast, humming along to a pop song playing faintly from the small radio by the window. Rebecca was 29, her blonde hair fluffy and voluminous, styled perfectly as was common in that decade. Her smile was warm, eyes gentle, and every movement she made reflected joy and love. Her husband Adam, a handsome man of 32 with thick, perfectly combed back hair, walked into the kitchen wearing a cream-colored suit typical of the time. He flashed a smile toward Rebecca, pouring coffee and taking a careful sip, cautious not to spill on his pristine clothes. "Today's the big day," Rebecca smiled, glancing over at Adam. "I know, she's been practicing all week," Adam replied, affection evident in his voice. From down the hall came the sound of tiny footsteps. Moments later, 4-year-old Sarah bounded into the kitchen, her laughter bubbling through the morning air. She wore a soft pink tutu, her chestnut hair carefully styled in a neat bun. Her sparkling eyes shone with excitement as she spun gracefully in front of her parents, proudly displaying her ballerina outfit. "Look, Mommy, I'm ready to dance." Sarah giggled, twirling on tiptoe, nearly losing her balance but steadying herself in time. "You're going to be wonderful," Rebecca whispered, kneeling and hugging her daughter tightly, savoring the innocence of that perfect moment. After breakfast, the family left for Sarah's ballet recital at the iconic Central Theater in downtown San Diego. Traffic was thick as families across the city flocked to the theater. The streets bustled with activity, full of people smiling, laughing, enjoying the carefree warmth of early summer. They arrived at the theater shortly before noon, stepping out into the busy parking lot. Sarah held both her parents' hands, bouncing excitedly between them. Inside, the lobby buzzed with energy. Families chatted excitedly, and little girls in tutus scampered about, their voices high-pitched and full of laughter. Sarah joined her ballet class backstage, waving cheerfully as she disappeared from sight. Rebecca and Adam took their seats, eyes full of pride and anticipation. Soon, the lights dimmed, and the music filled the theater with a magical sweetness. The curtains opened, and there stood Sarah, front and center, confident and radiant. Her little feet moved gracefully, a natural talent clear even at such a tender age. The recital was a huge success. Parents cheered enthusiastically as the final notes faded away and the curtains closed gently. Rebecca wiped away a joyful tear, squeezing Adam's hand tightly. Everything felt perfect, idyllic. But nobody could have imagined how quickly it would all change. After the recital, families spilled into the lobby. Rebecca spotted a small cart selling cotton candy near the main entrance. Sarah tugged excitedly at her mother's hand, eyes wide and pleading. "Mommy, please." "Cotton candy," she begged. Rebecca smiled, unable to resist her daughter's charm. "Of course, sweetheart," she said softly. "Adam, can you hold our seats by the door? I'll get her the cotton candy." Adam nodded, giving Sarah a playful wink before heading over to secure their seats in the busy lobby. Rebecca approached the vendor, Sarah close at her side. A sudden tap on her shoulder diverted her attention, a friend from the neighborhood, greeting her warmly and briefly chatting about the recital. It lasted less than a minute, but when Rebecca turned back around, her heart dropped instantly. Sarah was gone. "Sarah?" she called softly, eyes scanning the crowd. No answer. Anxiety surged rapidly. Her voice grew louder. "Sarah, where are you, honey? Still nothing." Panic surged through Rebecca. She frantically scanned the crowded lobby, her voice trembling as she called her daughter's name again and again. Adam hurried over, confusion in his eyes. "Rebecca, what's wrong?" "I can't find her, Adam. She was just right here," Rebecca gasped. Her eyes filled with fear. Together, they searched every corner, every bathroom, every hallway. Their voices grew louder, more desperate. Time slowed as panic spread among nearby families. Soon, security guards and theater staff joined in the search. The chaos intensified. Yet, amidst the confusion, nobody could find any sign of Sarah. Minutes felt like hours, and hours passed into nightfall. Police arrived, their presence solemn and authoritative. Flashlights illuminated dark corridors. Dogs sniffed quietly through empty dressing rooms. And then, at the bottom of a staircase that led outside, a detective found something small, fragile, heartbreaking, a tiny pink ballet slipper. Rebecca broke down upon seeing it, clutching the slipper to her chest, sobbing uncontrollably. Adam, speechless and helpless, stood frozen nearby, grief etched deeply on his face. Detectives swiftly questioned everyone who had attended the recital: parents, children, theater employees. Each interrogation revealed nothing. No witnesses. No suspicious persons. It was as if Sarah had simply vanished into thin air. Days turned into a blur of grief and uncertainty. Rebecca refused to sleep, to eat. Adam did his best to comfort her, though his own anguish was painfully clear. Flyers went up throughout San Diego. Local television stations aired pleas for information, and volunteers combed every nearby street, alley, and park. Yet every passing hour seemed to erase any hope of finding Sarah alive. Finally, a week later, on a rainy afternoon, 2 detectives knocked gently at the Miller's front door. Rebecca opened, her eyes darkened by sleepless nights, face pale from exhaustion. "Mrs. Miller," one detective began softly, sympathy clear in his voice. "We've conducted a thorough investigation. Unfortunately, we found no evidence, no leads. It's as if Sarah vanished without a trace." Rebecca stared at them, shaking her head, unwilling to believe. "There must be something you missed. Someone must have seen something. Please," she begged. The detective lowered his head, voice gentle but resolute. "I'm sorry." At this point, there's no evidence of foul play, no witnesses, no leads. It's almost like she never existed at all. Rebecca's knees buckled. Adam caught her gently, holding her close as sobs shook her body. The detectives quietly departed, leaving the family alone in their unimaginable grief. Night settled over San Diego, and the once warm, vibrant city felt suddenly cold, empty, haunted by the echoing absence of a little girl who had danced her. Hardout smiled brightly and then disappeared without explanation. Rebecca clung to the tiny ballet slipper that represented everything lost. Her daughter's laughter echoed silently in her memories, tormenting her with unanswered questions. Where was Sarah? Was she safe? Would she ever see her again? And in that house once filled with joy and laughter, now dwelled sorrow, silence, and the unbearable weight of the unknown. Rebecca sat alone by the window, staring blankly into the dark night. The detective's words echoed endlessly in her mind. There's no trace of Sarah Miller. It's as if she never existed. In the weeks that followed Sarah's disappearance, the Miller household became a shadow of the happy home it once was. Day after endless day, Rebecca sat motionless by the phone, jumping at every shrill ring, praying for any news that her little girl had been found. Each unanswered call, each quiet knock at the door, deepened the painful reality that Sarah was truly gone. The local news kept the story alive for a while. Reporters flocked to the Millers' front porch, their bulky cameras and microphones becoming painfully familiar sights. Photographs of Sarah, smiling brightly in her pink tutu, filled television screens across San Diego. Neighbors organized candlelit vigils, and posters featuring Sarah's innocent face were plastered on telephone poles, storefront windows, and park benches. Yet, with each passing day, the media's attention slowly faded, leaving behind only unbearable silence. Police questioned friends, family, and even strangers from the theater audience. Detective Carl Summers, a compassionate but weary officer, meticulously combed through every detail again and again. Each promising lead dissolved into disappointment. Empty alleyways, vague eyewitness accounts, and cruel prank calls that tore Rebecca's heart apart with false hope. There was a brief moment, 2 months after Sarah vanished, when neighbors reported seeing a suspicious van parked near their house. Rebecca clung desperately to that glimmer of possibility. Yet, after an intense search, the van's owner turned out to be nothing more than a harmless delivery man. Rebecca's fragile hope shattered once again. With every passing disappointment, Rebecca and Adam drifted further apart. Adam coped by immersing himself in work, arriving home late each night, desperate to escape the haunting memories of his missing daughter. Rebecca's grief consumed her entirely. She became fixated on every missing child report, cutting out newspaper articles and storing them obsessively in boxes. Their marriage, once warm and full of laughter, crumbled beneath the weight of unbearable loss. One rainy evening, nearly a year after Sarah's disappearance, they sat silently at their kitchen table. Adam finally broke the silence, his voice tired, filled with sorrow. "Rebecca, I can't do this anymore. It's killing us. I need some space." Rebecca stared at him blankly, the pain too deep to express. They both knew that night was the end of their life together. After Adam moved out, Rebecca fell into an even darker solitude. Her days became a blur, marked only by anniversaries, Sarah's birthdays, Christmases, every Mother's Day without her daughter. She spent hours each night watching old VHS tapes, seeing Sarah's carefree laughter, her tiny feet dancing across the living room carpet. Each replay twisted the knife deeper into her heart, yet she couldn't stop herself. She continued calling Detective Summers each month, hoping something new had emerged. But the detective's answer never changed. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Miller. Nothing yet." Life moved forward relentlessly, and the vibrant 1980s slowly faded into the 90s. Pop culture shifted. Hairstyles flattened, neon colors dimmed into earthier tones. As years passed, the world around Rebecca changed drastically, yet her life remained tragically frozen in June 1988. In 1993, Adam moved to Denver, starting a new life far from the memories that haunted him. He remarried quietly, rarely reaching out to Rebecca. Their phone conversations became infrequent and uncomfortable, each call ending swiftly after empty promises to keep in touch. Rebecca tried to cope, volunteering occasionally at the local library to fill her empty days. She found small comfort in books, losing herself briefly in worlds untouched by her reality. Yet, every evening, she returned home to the deafening silence of an empty house filled only with memories and grief. In 1998, 10 years after Sarah vanished, Rebecca recorded a new VHS tape as she had done every year. Sitting alone in the quiet living room, she spoke softly to the camera, her voice filled with sadness and longing. "Happy 14th birthday, Sarah. If you're seeing this someday, please know Mommy loves you so much. I'll never stop looking for you, sweetheart. Never." Her voice broke, tears streaming silently down her face as the camera's red light blinked steadily. The new millennium arrived with fanfare across the globe, yet Rebecca barely noticed. Friends and family moved on, stopped mentioning Sarah's name, believing it was kinder to let go. But Rebecca wouldn't forget. She continued keeping Sarah's bedroom exactly as it was that morning of June 12th, untouched and preserved. In the quiet hours before dawn, Rebecca often sat alone, holding Sarah's tiny pink ballet slipper. The fabric, now faded and worn, had become her greatest comfort and deepest pain, a symbol of everything lost and everything she still prayed to find. As the years stretched further, Rebecca saw missing child cases frequently appearing on television, and her heart broke anew each time. She always reached out to the affected parents, offering them quiet support and understanding, knowing intimately the torture of not knowing. Meanwhile, Adam lived quietly in Denver, guilt lingering in his heart, reminding him of the daughter he'd lost and the marriage he'd abandoned. He too saved newspaper clippings and watched news reports, unable to completely detach from his past. Yet pride and shame prevented him from reaching out to Rebecca, leaving him trapped in a lonely limbo. The world moved relentlessly forward. New music trends came and went. Technology rapidly evolved. Cell phones replaced home phones. The internet connilions instantly. Yet Rebecca continued living as if frozen in a photograph taken on that painful day. Her hope, though battered and worn, stubbornly refused to die. Finally, in early April of 2011, Rebecca decided to take a rare drive into Los Angeles to visit an old friend. It was a clear spring afternoon, traffic thick as always on the famous Sunset Boulevard. Radios blasted modern hits, cars sped past, and Rebecca tried to relax into the unfamiliar rhythm of the city. She stopped at a red light, glancing absently at the giant billboards lining the busy street. Her eyes drifted lazily from one advertisement to another: perfume, clothing, movies, until something suddenly caught her attention. Rebecca's breath froze in her chest. On a massive billboard, high above the busy boulevard, was the face of a striking young woman holding a bottle of water, her eyes sparkling with confidence. Her dark, wavy hair fell gently around her shoulders, her expression serene yet confident. Rebecca's heart pounded violently. Her hands trembled, gripping the steering wheel tightly. She knew that face instantly, the curve of the jaw, the slight dimple in her chin, those unmistakable eyes that stared down at her from above. It was Sarah, grown now, but undeniably, unmistakably Sarah. Rebecca felt dizzy, overwhelmed, unable to move or breathe. She ignored the honking horns behind her, frozen in shock, hope, and disbelief. For the first time in 23 unbearable years, Rebecca felt something other than loss, a fragile, desperate hope. She whispered softly to herself, tears streaming down her face, "Oh my God, Sarah, I found you." Rebecca remained frozen, staring upward at the billboard as cars angrily swerved around her. High above Sunset Boulevard, illuminated by the golden California sun, was the face of the daughter she had lost and searched for, suddenly and impossibly alive again, her Sarah. Rebecca sat frozen in her car, the traffic swirling around her in an angry blur. Her eyes stayed locked on the giant billboard high above Sunset Boulevard. It was her. There was no doubt in her mind. Those eyes, that gentle curve of her chin, and even the way her dark hair caught the sunlight. It was Sarah, unmistakably grown into a beautiful young woman. She gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles turning white. Her heart pounded violently inside her chest, her breath shallow and quick. Tears blurred her vision as a storm of emotions overwhelmed her: shock, disbelief, confusion, and a powerful surge of hope she had buried decades ago. Cars honked impatiently, snapping her back to reality. Shaking, she moved slowly to the side of the road and parked, barely noticing the angry gestures directed her way. Once safely stopped, she stared again at the billboard, needing absolute certainty. Aquaflow, it read simply beneath Sarah's smiling face. Rebecca's hands trembled uncontrollably as she pulled out her phone and frantically typed the brand's name into an internet search. Within minutes, she found the address of the advertising agency in Los Angeles. Without hesitation, she turned her car around, feeling the rush of adrenaline pushing her onward. She had waited 23 long, painful years for this moment. She refused to let this chance slip away. The agency was located downtown in a sleek glass building buzzing with activity. Inside, Rebecca approached the modern reception desk, where a young woman smiled politely at her. "Can I help you?" the receptionist asked. Rebecca's voice trembled as she replied, "I need information about one of your models. The one on the Aquaflow billboard. It's incredibly important." The receptionist hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, but we can't share personal information about our models." "You don't understand," Rebecca said desperately, pulling out a photograph from her purse. It was Sarah at 4 years old, smiling innocently in her ballet tutu. "This model is my daughter. She disappeared in 1988. Please, I need your help." Seeing the desperation in Rebecca's eyes, the receptionist softened slightly. She excused herself, returning minutes later with a serious-looking man who introduced himself as Robert Harris, the director of the Aquaflow campaign. Robert led Rebecca to a private office, sensing the gravity of the situation. "Mrs. Miller, I heard your story," he began gently. "I'm afraid the model's name is Sophie Evans. She's British, from London." Rebecca shook her head stubbornly. "No, you don't understand. That's my daughter Sarah. I'd recognize her anywhere. Please, you have to believe me." Robert listened carefully, studying the photo she had brought. The resemblance was uncanny, undeniable. He sighed softly, deeply moved by Rebecca's story. "All right," Robert finally said. "I shouldn't be doing this, but I'll tell you what I know. Sophie doesn't remember much about her childhood. She told us she grew up in an orphanage in London, St. Clair's. That's all the information I have." Rebecca's heart raced. "An orphanage in London?" Her mind spun with possibilities. Could it really be Sarah? Without wasting time, Rebecca booked the next available flight to London. As the airplane took off from Los Angeles, she stared out the window, her thoughts racing as fast as the jet engines. Fear and hope battled inside her. Was she really about to find her daughter, or would this lead to yet another devastating dead end? During the flight, Rebecca couldn't sleep. Instead, she replayed memories of Sarah's childhood, haunted by the image of that tiny pink ballet slipper she'd kept safe for decades. She thought about Adam, wondering how he would react if he knew what she was doing. Would he believe her? Or dismiss it as another hopeless fantasy? Landing in London the next morning, Rebecca found herself navigating unfamiliar streets beneath gray skies and drizzling rain. She hired a taxi, her heart pounding harder with each passing mile. St. Clair's Orphanage appeared at the end of a long, winding driveway lined with tall, bare trees. The building itself was large, old, and imposing, a relic from another era, built of dark brick and heavy stone. She approached the door hesitantly, her stomach knotted with anxiety. Inside, the air felt cold, carrying the faint scent of disinfectant. A stern-looking woman introduced herself as Margaret Hill, the orphanage administrator, and listened cautiously to Rebecca's incredible story. "Mrs. Miller, we have strict confidentiality policies," Margaret said firmly, yet Rebecca's desperate expression softened her tone. "Still, given the circumstances... let's check the old files together." They moved quietly to a dusty records room filled with shelves stacked high with boxes and folders. Margaret searched methodically until she located a thin, faded file labeled Sophie Evans. Rebecca's breath quickened as Margaret laid the folder gently on a table, opening it slowly. Inside were sparse, yellowed papers, brief, handwritten notes detailing Sophie's arrival at the orphanage in late 1988. They mentioned an unknown woman dropping off a small, confused girl, offering no real identification or background details. Rebecca's heart sank at the lack of clarity. But then Margaret removed one last document from the file, a faded photograph, clipped carefully to the back page. Rebecca stared at the photo, her blood turning cold. It showed a small girl, wide-eyed and frightened, dressed in a simple white dress. Rebecca's eyes filled instantly with tears. Even through the faded print, the girl's face was unmistakable. Her heart recognized every feature: the shape of her eyes, the soft line of her cheeks, the cautious, vulnerable look. It was Sarah. Tears spilled freely down Rebecca's cheeks, her hands shaking uncontrollably as she clutched the photograph. Decades of unanswered questions, heartbreak, and hope surged to the surface. Margaret gently touched her shoulder, understanding silently. "That's her," Rebecca whispered, voice breaking. "That's my Sarah, my little girl." Margaret nodded solemnly. "Then it appears your daughter was brought here under a false name, but there are no further records, no names, nothing else." Rebecca barely heard Margaret's words. Her mind flooded with emotion. After 23 long years, her hope had finally led to answers. Sarah was alive. Now she had undeniable proof. Holding that fragile photograph in her trembling fingers, Rebecca felt the beginning of a new resolve, stronger than ever before. She would find Sarah, talk to her, hold her again, no matter the cost. Nothing in this world could stop her now. Rebecca held the photograph close to her chest, tears streaming down her face, finally knowing for certain. The faded image from St. Clair's Orphanage confirmed it without a doubt. Sophie Evans was indeed her lost daughter, Sarah Miller. In London, Sophie Evans had built a life that many could only dream of. At 27, she was one of the city's most recognizable faces, featured in magazines, billboards, and television commercials. To the outside world, Sophie seemed to have it all: beauty, success, and wealth. Yet, beneath her composed exterior, Sophie lived with a silent unease that had haunted her for as long as she could remember. Her luxurious apartment overlooked the River Thames, a sparkling view that tourists would envy, yet Sophie rarely enjoyed. Most evenings, she sat quietly by herself, unable to shake the persistent feeling that something fundamental was missing from her life. Her memories of childhood were cloudy at best, non-existent at worst. She had grown up in St. Clair's Orphanage, never truly knowing where she came from or who she was. Lately, Sophie's sleep had grown increasingly troubled. Almost every night, she awoke breathless from vivid dreams she couldn't understand. Always the same images: a tiny pink ballet slipper lying abandoned, a grand staircase carpeted in deep crimson velvet, and the distant, haunting melody of classical music. Each dream ended with her standing alone, confused, tears streaming down her face. Unable to remember why she felt such intense sadness, the dreams unsettled her deeply, leaving her weary and distracted during photo shoots and public appearances. Despite her growing fame, Sophie felt increasingly isolated, desperate for answers to questions she couldn't yet define. One rainy afternoon, returning home from a tiring photo shoot, Sophie found a small package waiting at her door. She carried it inside cautiously, not recognizing the handwriting on the envelope. Carefully opening the package, she found herself staring at a worn photo album. Her heart quickened inexplicably as she opened it to the first page. Inside, she saw photographs of a little girl smiling brightly, twirling happily in a pink tutu, hugging a woman with loving eyes. The images were completely unfamiliar, yet something about them struck Sophie deeply. As she flipped through page after page, tears filled her eyes. Every picture sparked a strange, distant feeling of recognition, almost like echoes from a life she'd forgotten. At the album's end was a handwritten note. "Dear Sarah, if you're seeing this, please call me. I've searched for you every day of my life. Love always, your mother, Rebecca." Sophie's hands trembled. Sarah? Could it be possible that she wasn't who she thought she was? Could these photos hold the key to the emptiness she had felt her entire life? She barely slept that night, torn between skepticism and hope. The next morning, her heart racing, Sophie finally dialed the phone number written carefully beneath Rebecca's name. "Hello?" Rebecca's voice answered gently, cautious yet filled with an unmistakable hope. Sophie hesitated, fighting back tears. Is this Rebecca?" There was a sharp intake of breath, then silence. Finally, Rebecca's voice returned, shaking with emotion. "Yes, is this Sarah?" "I don't know," Sophie whispered, suddenly overwhelmed. "I think, maybe." Their first conversation was hesitant, filled with long silences and whispered apologies, each woman afraid to hope too much. Sophie listened intently as Rebecca recounted Sarah's disappearance 23 years earlier, recognizing fragments of her dreams in Rebecca's descriptions: the ballet slipper, the theater staircase, the classical music from the recital. Finally, after countless phone calls and sleepless nights, they agreed to meet in person. Rebecca chose a quiet cafe in central London, a place cozy enough for their fragile reunion. When the day arrived, Sophie waited anxiously at a small table near the window, nervously stirring her tea, her heart pounding loudly. She glanced up as Rebecca entered, instantly recognizing her from the photographs. Rebecca paused, her eyes filled with tears as they settled upon Sophie's face for the first time. "Sophie," Rebecca whispered softly, approaching slowly, afraid the vision before her might vanish if she moved too fast. Sophie stood, feeling awkward yet deeply moved, unsure how to greet this woman who claimed to be her mother. Rebecca gently embraced her, and in that moment, Sophie felt a deep, undeniable connection. Tears filled her eyes as they finally sat down together, facing one another across the table. They spoke carefully at first, choosing words delicately, both women painfully aware of the years stolen from them. Rebecca told Sophie more about her life before her disappearance, stories of laughter, love, and the simple joys they'd shared. Sophie listened closely, her emotions swirling between excitement, disbelief, and sorrow. "I wish I could remember," Sophie whispered, voice trembling with frustration. I've always felt incomplete, like part of me was missing. Now you tell me about these things. They seem so familiar, yet still so far away." Rebecca nodded, understanding perfectly. "We'll find the truth together," she promised firmly. "You're not alone anymore." Together, they began searching for answers about Sophie's mysterious arrival at the orphanage. Returning to St. Clair's, they discovered old records mentioning an elderly English couple who had discreetly delivered Sophie to the orphanage shortly after Sarah's disappearance. The couple, identified only as Margaret and Henry Shaw, had lived in an isolated countryside cottage. Records showed they'd passed away years ago in a tragic car accident, leaving no further clues behind. The revelations deepened Sophie's confusion. Could these people have been involved in her disappearance? Why had they taken her? What was their connection to her past? Days passed in relentless investigation, but every lead ended in frustration. Sophie grew weary, feeling trapped in a maze of incomplete memories. Rebecca remained determined, unwilling to abandon her search again, no matter how exhausting or painful. Then, on a cold, gray afternoon, as Sophie returned home from another exhausting day, she discovered an envelope slipped beneath her apartment door. No return address, no identifying marks. Her heart quickened with apprehension as she carefully opened it. Inside, she found a small, neatly folded piece of paper. Hands shaking, Sophie opened it slowly, her breath catching as she read the single line of text written in elegant handwriting. "If you want to know the whole truth, find Eleanor Phillips." Sophie's heart pounded furiously. She had never heard this name before, yet something deep inside told her it was important, crucial to unraveling the tangled mystery of her past. Eleanor Phillips held the answers she'd spent her entire life searching for. Sophie stood motionless in her apartment, staring down at the note. Her pulse raced wildly. Whoever Eleanor Phillips was, Sophie was certain that this woman was the key to finally uncovering the full truth about who she really was, and why she had been taken away from the life she once knew. After receiving the cryptic note bearing the name Eleanor Phillips, Sophie and Rebecca felt a new urgency guiding their search. They knew this woman held the key to understanding what had truly happened 23 years ago. Together, mother and daughter spent countless sleepless nights digging through old records and contacting authorities, gradually uncovering Eleanor Phillips' troubled past. They learned that Eleanor had once lived in San Diego and worked as a cleaner at the Central Theater, the same theater where Sarah had vanished. Rebecca's heart sank as memories rushed back, vividly recalling the busy lobby, cotton candy stand, and the desperate chaos after Sarah disappeared. Could Eleanor Phillips have been right there, silently watching everything unfold? Their research deepened further as they discovered Eleanor had experienced devastating personal tragedy. Years before Sarah disappeared, Eleanor had lost her own daughter, Abigail, in a tragic car accident. Abigail had been about Sarah's age at the time, a vibrant girl with sparkling eyes and an infectious laugh. After Abigail's death, Eleanor's life unraveled dramatically. Medical records hinted at severe depression, hospitalization, and mental breakdowns, revealing a woman broken by grief. Rebecca and Sophie exchanged nervous glances as they pieced together the troubling portrait. They knew Eleanor had fled the United States shortly after Sarah's disappearance, relocating to a remote village in Yorkshire, northern England, becoming reclusive and almost invisible to the world. Sophie felt anxiety tightening in her chest. She feared the woman they were about to confront was dangerously unstable. Despite their fears, they made swift arrangements to travel north to Yorkshire. Their train journey from London was silent, heavy with anticipation and dread. As the city faded away and lush green countryside rushed by their window, Rebecca's fingers nervously twisted around the photograph she'd found in Sophie's orphanage records. She had waited over 2 decades to finally unravel this terrible mystery. Yet part of her feared what truth they might uncover. Yorkshire appeared beneath gray, rain-heavy skies. Thick mist drifted across hills and stone cottages lined narrow, roads winding endlessly into the countryside. Following vague directions obtained from local archives, they reached Eleanor's isolated home, dilapidated cottage tucked far from town, nearly hidden by thick foliage and looming trees. Sophie knocked hesitantly on the weathered wooden door, her heart pounding. After several tense moments, the door creaked open slowly. Eleanor Phillips appeared, a frail, elderly woman with gray, unkempt hair, deep lines etched into her pale face, and eyes that glistened with suspicion. "What do you want?" Eleanor snapped, her voice cold and defensive. Rebecca stepped forward carefully, gently explaining their reason for coming. Eleanor's eyes narrowed with instant recognition at Rebecca's words. Sophie noticed the older woman's hands trembling slightly. Eleanor reluctantly allowed them inside. The interior of the house was unsettling, cluttered with faded photographs, dusty children's toys, and old porcelain dolls arranged meticulously on shelves. The air felt stale, thick with decades of grief. Rebecca gently pressed Eleanor to reveal the truth. For several minutes, Eleanor stared at them in silence, her breathing shallow, hands tightly gripping a small porcelain doll. Finally, her expression softened slightly, replaced by a deep sadness. "Yes," Eleanor began quietly, her voice wavering. "I was there that day, at the theater. I watched you, Mrs. Miller. You seemed so happy with your little girl. She reminded me painfully of my Abigail, my child, my everything." Rebecca listened breathlessly, tears welling in her eyes, desperately holding back anger and sorrow. "When I lost Abigail," Eleanor continued bitterly, "I lost myself. I became invisible, worthless. My husband left. My friends abandoned me. I spent every waking moment in despair. Then one day, a wealthy English couple approached me. They saw Sarah dancing on stage and became fixated. They offered me enough money to disappear, to start over. All they asked was that I help them take the child away quietly." Rebecca gasped sharply, her heart breaking anew at this horrifying revelation. Sophie stared at Eleanor in disbelief, finally hearing the sinister truth about her past. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "I swear, at first I refused, but the emptiness consumed me. When I saw Sarah smiling, so full of life, so much like Abigail, I convinced myself she could fill my void, somehow heal me. So I agreed." Rebecca's voice trembled with grief. "You took my child from me? For money? For selfish comfort?" Eleanor lowered her eyes, overcome with shame. "I told myself Sarah would have a better life with them, a rich couple, able to give her everything I never could. But the truth was simpler. I just wanted to escape my own pain." Rebecca could barely speak through her tears. "You destroyed our lives. My daughter was everything." Sophie reached gently for Rebecca's hand, steadying her. "What about the couple who took me?" Eleanor hesitated. "Margaret and Henry Shaw. They had money, influence. They desperately wanted a child and didn't care how they got one. They arranged new identification for you, forged birth records, passports. They took you to England and erased all connections to your past." Rebecca shuddered, imagining how easily her daughter had been stolen from her world. Why St. Clair's? Sophie asked softly, heart heavy with sadness. "Something went wrong," Eleanor admitted bitterly. "Within months, the Shaws panicked. Questions arose about your origins. To avoid suspicion, they quietly placed you in St. Clair's orphanage, convincing authorities you were a distant relative. They promised they'd return for you when things calmed down, but their lies caught up to them. Before they could reclaim you, they died tragically in a car crash, leaving you trapped, hidden behind a lie. Rebecca's anger softened slightly as she watched Eleanor's haunted expression. Decades of guilt had clearly ravaged the elderly woman, leaving her empty and broken. Yet Rebecca still needed one final piece of the puzzle. Why the note, Eleanor? Why now? Eleanor looked up suddenly, confused. Note? I never sent any note. A chill filled the air, sudden and deep. Sophie felt her heart racing in fear. If not you, then who? Eleanor closed her eyes tightly, trembling visibly. Then it's true. What's true? Rebecca demanded, panic rising. Eleanor's voice dropped to a whisper, her gaze haunted. Someone else knew all along. Someone close to you, Mrs. Miller. Someone you trusted deeply. They knew exactly what happened and chose silence. Rebecca's heart froze. Fear and disbelief flashed across her face. What? Who knew? Tell me. Eleanor shook her head sadly. I cannot say more, but you're closer than you realize. The person who sent that note wanted you to find me, to punish me, or perhaps to finally free themselves. But know this, you're greatest. Betrayal was never mine alone. The words echoed heavily in the quiet room. Rebecca and Sophie stood stunned, frozen in shock. Someone Rebecca loved, someone she'd trusted, had been hiding the truth all along, allowing her to suffer decades of pain and uncertainty. Rebecca felt sick, betrayed, desperate. Eleanor's eyes held profound sadness. After decades of silence, the dark truth had finally surfaced, bringing pain, loss, and betrayal more horrifying than either woman had imagined. Rebecca stared numbly into Eleanor's eyes, the devastating truth echoing cruelly in her mind. The kidnapping was never Eleanor's secret alone. Someone painfully close to the Miller family had known exactly what had happened to Sarah from the very beginning, silently watching Rebecca suffer for 23 unbearable years. Rebecca and Sophie returned to San Diego with hearts burdened by Eleanor Phillips' shocking revelation. The flight across the Atlantic was quiet and heavy, each woman lost deep within her own thoughts. The notion that someone close, someone loved and trusted, had willingly hidden the truth haunted every moment of their journey home. Rebecca gazed out the airplane window, the ocean passing beneath them, reflecting on Eleanor's words. She recalled every interaction with friends and family during those endless years of searching. Who among them could possibly have known Sarah's fate and stayed silent? They arrived home exhausted but determined. Together, they began carefully revisiting the past. Old boxes of letters, photographs, and personal notes sprawled across Rebecca's living room floor, each paper holding potential clues. The truth was somewhere hidden, waiting to be uncovered. Days of intense investigation slowly narrowed their focus. The painful realization dawned gradually upon Rebecca, as each clue pointed unmistakably toward someone she had never imagined could betray her in such a profound way. Adam, Sarah's own father. Rebecca's heart refused to accept it at first, but soon evidence piled too high to ignore. Documents she had found hidden among Adam's belongings revealed heartbreaking letters, dated almost 15 years earlier. Letters Adam had received from anonymous senders hinting at Sarah's location. Letters he had ignored, hidden, and tried to forget. Rebecca and Sophie knew they had to confront Adam directly, no matter how painful it might be. Rebecca's hands trembled uncontrollably as she dialed Adam's number for the first time in years. Her voice shook as she asked to meet, and though Adam hesitated briefly, the seriousness in Rebecca's tone convinced him to agree. The reunion was arranged in Adam's quiet home in Denver. The air was thick with tension when Rebecca and Sophie arrived. Adam looked older, worn by life. guilt subtly etched in every line of his face. His eyes widened, first with surprise at seeing Sophie groan, then with deep sadness, understanding instantly why they had come. Rebecca didn't waste time, her words painfully direct. "Did you know, Adam? Did you really know where Sarah was all these years?" Adam hesitated, the shame and fear visible in his expression. Finally, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "Yes," he whispered softly, "I knew." Rebecca's heart broke all over again, anger and sadness colliding inside her chest. "Why? How could you hide this from me, from her?" Adam sank slowly into a chair, burying his face in his hands. "Rebecca, after Sarah disappeared, I broke completely. My life fell apart. I blamed myself every moment. Years later, someone sent me letters clues about Sarah's whereabouts, but by then, I'd convinced myself it was too late. Too much damage had been done. I was terrified, Rebecca terrified that even if we found her, she'd hate me, hate us, both for failing her so completely." Sophie listened quietly, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. Rebecca sat down, shaking her head slowly, struggling to process Adam's devastating admission. "You had no right to decide that alone, Rebecca," whispered bitterly. "We had a chance to find her, to bring her home, but you threw it away because of fear?" Adam's voice broke with agony. "I'm so sorry. I made a terrible mistake. I have lived every single day with this guilt eating me alive. I didn't know how to tell you, didn't know how to face what I'd done." Sophie finally spoke softly, her voice gentle despite her pain. "We've all lost enough already, but now, at least, we finally know the truth." In that moment, the weight of 23 years of pain filled the room, raw and overwhelming. Yet beneath that pain grew something else, a fragile, tentative hope. Sophie reached out, gently taking both her parents' hands, connecting them again after decades of painful separation. "We can't change the past," Sophie whispered softly, "but we can start again, together." Rebecca, Sophie, and Adam begin the slow work of healing. Rebecca and Sophie's bond deepens while Adam, burdened by guilt, cautiously reconnects with his daughter. As Sophie blends memories of her childhood as Sarah with her life as Sophie, her recurring nightmares fade, replaced by newfound peace. The family gradually reconciles, Rebecca releasing decades of resentment and Adam openly owning his mistakes. Returning together to the abandoned Central Theater, Sophie uncovers the matching pink ballet slipper, giving mother and daughter the tangible closure they needed. Holding both slippers, they embrace, accepting the past and stepping into a future built on forgiveness, restored love, and renewed strength.